A wine to taste blind.
I can already tell what it is just by looking at it. I have magic powers.
Whoa. Now hold on, sorry, before you go.
Yeah.
Oh,
Just gonna
wow,
walk
the camera
through.
crew gets
Yep.
a sample as
We
well.
get a little help this side as well. All right, so introduce yourselves and jump in.
I'm Bree Stock, Master of Wine and Winemaker with Limited Edition.
And I am Chad Stock, winemaker with Limited Edition.
Blind tasting.
Intensely golden color,
Suggestive of two possibilities,
oak, age, or botrytis.
three possibilities, maybe four possibilities. My first thought is botrytis,
Mine was botrytis as well.
because it has this deep yellow hue to it. And while, yes, that can come from oxidative aging, usually for me, an oxidative aging by barrel or through cement or some other vessel is usually less intensely yellowed. It's usually a little bit more of like a amber or a little bit more of some like brown, kind of brown tones in there.
Well, and it's a brilliant gold. You know, like there's
Yeah, exactly.
there's
So, I
a
mean, it's
brilliance
brilliant.
to it, which you normally don't get from oak influence or age. There's going to be a dullness.
The other thing is that it could actually just come from actual skinsiness, or what I would say extraction from the skins, which is not super common in white wine. So it makes my brain go to like what kind of processes and then what regions. By use some of these processes, it might help us identify what this is. So I could see that this could have been made from dried grapes, potentially, right? And then those dried grapes, semi-dried grapes, have some oxidation during the process of drying. Then also while pressing, it's going to be more concentrated and probably with the skins degraded, could be releasing a lot of color, a lot of tannin, and compounds that would then bring kind of this deeper yellow as well. Eh?
But immediately on the nose, it's botrytis.
Yeah, it smells like shower curtain,
Pool
pool
toy.
toy, for
Fresh,
sure.
yeah. And also that sort of marmalade, quince,
Yeah.
a concentrated citrus honey, exotic citrus and honey.
And that kind of waxed fruit.
Yeah, very waxy.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, first thing that I notice on the palate is it's dry. I don't taste any residual sugar at all whatsoever. It's very concentrated. Very, very concentrated. It's very salty. I would guess the alcohol content's pretty high, 14s, probably at least. Malolactic content is there, but it's low, which suggests to me a warm region, a warm climate. But then you got the botrytis at the same time. So now my brain is starting to go back more towards like dried, like dried grapes or something like dehydrated grapes that have been, maybe have developed some botrytis while they were drying or something like that. Because that is possible.
I think I see more lactic there maybe than you do, because I'm getting that sort of, it's like a lactic yogurt character, like not soured milk, but it is yogurty, but it's more of a ripe fruit yogurt, so like concentrated peach. Whereas, so if I'm thinking about like lactic regions, then I'm thinking about like Chablis and like the apricot yogurt. But for me, this goes into a riper area, so maybe I'm thinking more like a warm region or a botrytic region of the Loire or of Alsace, like some of these lower lying river areas where it's a more moderate temperature that can get ripeness, but they're also getting botrytis at the same time. And then also, is this, what selection of botrytis is this? Because, when you have purposefully botrytic wines, you're not harvesting like the whole block at the same time. You're walking through and selectively harvesting for botrytis. And so, what level of botrytis impact and at what level of ripeness are they picking that?
Well, I mean, the acid is also really fierce, right? I mean, this is almost like if somebody made Jurançon and just fermented it dry for once. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of like Botrytis Petit Manseng.
Yeah.
But then, so let's talk about the aging. Do you taste wood? I feel like I taste some wood here, but I don't know for sure. I don't know if that's a Botrytis thing that's bringing like some earthiness and some cinnamon and some kind of like those oak spices that we'd see, nutmeg, allspice, some of that kind of characteristic. I don't know if that's from the Botrytis or if there's wood on this.
I feel like I think this is more Botrytis driven. I feel like this is more like dried fruit, like when you dry orchard fruits. So when you dry peaches and apricots and then eat them and you're left with that phenolic grip, for me, that's where that sort of furriness on the palate is coming from. It doesn't hit me in the same place that wood hits me. It hits me across the entirety of my palate. And then the acid comes pushing back. So I'm thinking of this as more of a late harvest Botrytis style.
So do you think that this could be some like perverted Riesling that's like a Grossgewach that's like super duper duper dry and was thus picked at like the pinnacle of ripeness, and it's just like a boozy monstrous Riesling?
I mean, it
kind of reminds me of last pick a little bit. I mean, but this has got some heat on it. There's some alcohol.
Yeah, there's some alcohol here. The glycerol weight and warmth is really mouth-filling. Yeah, I guess it could be Riesling for sure. I mean, it's aromatic enough, but I think.
Because what could get this dry, have this level of acid, be this salty? Think about a Riesling that went through full mallow, right? So you and I'm coming more and more towards your side of tasting the sourness of the lactic. In the beginning, I was like, it doesn't feel like it's that lactic. So maybe this is a warmer region because there wouldn't have been very much malic acid in the fruit. So by the time it was converted, you wouldn't have this lactic acid imprint. But as I'm tasting this wine that's lingering on my palate, it's building up and I'm getting this. It tastes almost like sea salt with cottage cheese.
And sourdough bread.
And so I'm thinking maybe actually this is a cold climate area. And if we were to consider this as a potential Riesling and it went through 100% mallow, that would be an example of a grape variety that would still have a potentially high amount of malic acid that could leave a lactic acid imprint like this at this high of octane, also from a region that would have Botrytis and still have this amount of actual tartaric acid left over at the end to be this high in acid. And now I'm actually starting to get some terpenes coming off my retronasal.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit hop. There's like a little bit of a citra hop and
hops,
like some kind of almost like a it's got a little bit of like, you know, skunky weed, like in a good way. Like it's got a little bit of that like purple.
Yeah, skunky weed with citrus and quince and bitters, and I mean it's a
I think this is. I'm just gonna put it out there. I think this
wine.
is some super perverted version of Riesling from Germany.
Yeah, I think it could be as well.
I
don't think it has the greenness of Grüne Veltliner. It could be like Knoll, you know, has all of those, incredibly complex characters.
But this isn't a region. This to me isn't a region, and this isn't a grape. This is a person. This this to me tastes like a wine that comes from somebody that has a really big brain.
I feel like there's regionality to it, though.
I feel like this is like, so when oftentimes it comes up in conversation where it's like, I'm not really a fan of champagne, but I've got a couple of producers that I love, but I don't think of them as champagne. I think of them, I think of those wines as them. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And when I think about a great Loire producer, I don't think of it as Loire. I think of like that madman or madwoman has like some really interesting wine.
I just think that's that mediocrity of humanity and regionality, though. I think that I think that's what makes great regions, is that there's producers in there that do something like this.
And you're like, oh, sorry, you can't be in the AOC anymore because your wine is not representative of the region.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Dumb it down a little.
And then their wine goes up to $300 a bottle?
Exactly.
Yeah. Like limited edition?
Yeah, exactly.
Next year, maybe? This to me is a person.
It's so aromatic. It's so
I feel like
perfumed.
I'm drinking somebody's brains right now.
No, I am in. I don't know. I'm in a Pannonian or River Valley, like low River Valley region with botrytis and ripe fruit, and also someone with the patience to keep this. I think it is in barrel, but I think there's.
What if this is Nicola? What if this is a Jolie? What if this is one of his? I mean, this doesn't taste like Chenin to me, but like Chenin could have a lot of malic. It could be a Nicola Jolie wine.
Yeah, I mean, Yeah, it could be.
But again, you'd be talking about Nicola Jolie because his wines, as far as I'm concerned, are more of a representation of him than they are of the grape in the region, right? So again, I just keep going back to this idea that whoever made this is, I don't think, making wines that are what their neighbors are making.
It's just immensely concentrated, immensely layered. I'm getting more of that marzipan lees character as well, so there's like an extension of aging on lees. However, the brilliance is
Indicates that it's young.
such that it still has some youth to it. So I wouldn't say that this was any more than.
This is not a wine in my training that is very easy to identify in terms of vintage or age, because it's such an extraordinarily unusual, unique, singular wine. For starters, but two, if I was to just try to break this down, technically speaking, a wine with this expression of botrytis, and then knowing what those fermentations are like, having done it myself many times, these wines oftentimes have an extreme amount of advanced complexity in their youth. And those complexities oftentimes make the wine feel older than it is. And then when that wine starts to then age, it doesn't age on the same trajectory as what we would use to gauge, let's say, a white Burgundy or an aromatic, more traditional style of, let's say, a Riesling, Spätlese level Riesling or something like that, where there's more of a structured way to approach how to guess how old it is. But when a wine like this exists and it's such this kind of unique expression of the people that make it or the place that it's from or whatever, it's hard to apply the general approach to it. So because of the color being what it is, it's suggestive that it's either mature or that it has botrytis. And in this particular case, we think that it has a lot of botrytis. But the hue still has some gentle notes of green and like kind of a pistachio, almost kind of like look to it, which indicates that it's actually young. So from a visual standpoint, it's really tricky because you have to really know botrytis and you have to really have worked with it and you have to have extensive experience looking at wines made in this way to really know. So this is a very specialized kind of wine to think about. I agree that also when I taste the wine and I smell the wine, I don't get any oxidative characteristics. I don't smell any caramelization. I don't smell any sautillant. I don't smell any nuttiness or.
So the age that's there is
I can't
bottle
taste.
age.
Yeah, while it's salty, I don't taste umami, and so there's a lot of characteristics on the palate and on the nose that do not indicate age for me.
But I think the age that is here is bottle age. I think it's a long fermentation to get the complexity of those flavors and all of the contributions. But I still think that this could be bottle age because of the concentration, the alcohol, the sugars is going to keep that looking fresher longer. And
I don't know, right? Like that's the thing. So like our best educated guess essentially for me would be that I don't think that this is any older than, I wouldn't say that this is any older than probably 5 to 7 years of age, would be my
I was going
guess.
to say 10 years, yeah.
Putting on your wine lover's hat, respond to this just emotionally. Do you like it?
I think this is an extraordinary wine. Yes, I do like the wine. I don't know that I enjoy sitting down and tasting it all by itself. It's a little bit more intellectual than delicious, but it is delicious. But there's work there. It's not, which is great. That's the thing. Great wines you work at when you drink them. because you really can think about this pretty deeply. And the alcohol for me is in this particular example of this wine, I'd love to try it in other vintages and figure out what this is, but the alcohol for me is a bit high. And I think that it would actually, with the right food, whether it's like a nice cheese puff pastry or something that essentially would have enough fattiness and saltiness to kind of balance this out. I feel like this is definitely a food wine, which is also really cool because I feel like in a very undeserved way, higher alcohol wines never really get like their spotlight for food pairings, and it's just not entirely true. You can balance out higher alcohols with food just like you can balance out high acids, so you just have to pair correctly. And I just feel like this is fun to drink because it's such this intellectual exercise, but it's a pretty serious food wine.
And I actually think that this as a white wine is so much more full-bodied and complex and would be able to stand up to some pretty serious dishes. I don't think it's, relegated to, a dessert or cheese plate as some, botrytis styles can be, or high alcohol styles can be.
Fatty sauce, like a nice fatty sausage with
I think
sauerkraut.
this is super versatile as a full-bodied white wine to drink with some really hearty, complex dishes.
Almost like a white Chateauneuf pop could pair with steak or something.
Yeah, I do. I do really enjoy it. It's a lot of wine. It's so ambitious. It's maybe trying a little too hard, but it's so ambitious. There's just so much packed into this wine that there's not a lot of space for anything else. Which maybe brings me back to it being younger again.
And for the record, neither of you know what this is. I haven't given you any clues you don't know at the time.
Sadly, no.
We have no idea other than the ideas that we currently have in our brain, which is going to be the best guess we can possibly make.
The great reveal. And now give me just a second before you do. Let me just make sure. Okay.
No way.
Holy shit. What? Wow. Oh
Incredibly ambitious, delicious wine. And
wow.
I said 10 years old, we're a little bit out still. Wow, that's concentrated.
Yeah.
That has got a ways to go.